I'm going to speak mostly about the technology, and as you mentioned, Jordan, it's a wave energy technology that converts the energy in ocean waves into electricity. We've dubbed it Uniwave. The reason for that is that it uses what's called a unidirectional oscillating water column. Now, I know that sounds technical, but an oscillating water column is essentially an artificial version of a blowhole. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with natural blowholes in the coastline, but if you do live in the Sydney region, you've probably heard of Kiama blowhole, which is, I think, probably the most famous in Australia. And there are many others throughout the world. It's an artificial, sorry, it's a natural opening in a rock face, in a cliff face with, on the coast, and water from waves moves into that cave, and the cave has an opening up above, which of course is called the spout, or the blowhole itself, and that projects the pressure inside from the waves, projects both water and air out. Well, ours is an artificial version of that, and we don't have water coming out the top, but we do have air that is squeezed out through the opening by the wave pressure inside the chamber, and in that spout is a turbine, and you can see the turbine is actually horizontal here at the back of the unit in the diagram that you can see. We're currently developing a 200 kilowatt version of this technology off King Island in Bass Strait. That will be connected very soon into the King Island Advanced Hybrid Power Station that's run by Hydro Tasmania. So I'll get on to more of that shortly. Just for a little bit more on the technical aspect of how this artificial blowhole works. As I said, ours is a unidirectional version. Now, there have been bidirectional versions in the past. Now, what that means is as the wave moves in and the water level inside that chamber rises, it compresses the air above and drives it past the turbine in one direction. But then as the wave recedes, it actually creates a vacuum inside and sucks the air back from the other direction. And the turbine needs to spin in the same direction, the same rotational direction, despite the fact that the air is moving back and forth in an oscillatory manner. We have now come up with a different version of that, which is, as I said, unidirectional. What happens as the wave comes in, you can see those arrows in the first diagram pushing the water up, compressing the air. Well, there are some flap valves, hinged flap valves that just simply open under that pressure and vent that pressure to the atmosphere. So it's not actually generating any electricity on the way up. But then as the wave starts to fall in the second diagram, those valves close, and there's only then one way for air to get back in to try to fill that vacuum. And that is how we spin the electricity. And you might think, well, if you're only doing it on one stroke, on the downstroke rather than the upstroke, aren't you only getting half the energy? Well, therein lies the non-intuitive or the counterintuitive and tricky bit, and the technical bit. And I won't go into into the physics of why that occurs, but we actually get about 15% more energy just on that downstroke than on the up and the downstrokes combined. So it's a more productive form of generating electricity through one of these oscillating water columns. But it also means that the turbine can be much simpler, because the turbine only sees the air now coming from one direction. It doesn't have to be a complicated turbine that has its blades flipping back and forth to account for the different direction of the airflow. Anyway, that's I won't go into any more detail than that. There's a fair bit written there, and hopefully you've got the idea now. We've been developing this for a few years now, since 2016, mostly through the wave tank test, wave tank test facility, which you can see here, which is part of the University of Tasmania's Australian Maritime College. And one of the main reasons I put this up is just so that you can see the quote from Associate Professor Gregor McFarlane, who's the head of the towing tank and has extensive experience in testing wave energy technologies. I'll just briefly quote here. He's tested various marine renewable energy technologies, including 12 different ocean wave energy devices from around the world. The last sentence, I think, is the telling one. There is no question in my mind that Wave Swell Energy's technology is among the best, if not the best, in all key operational aspects such as efficiency, performance, and survivability. So, you know, he would not have said that if he wasn't really serious about it. And we happen to know that you know, of all the tests, of all those 12 technologies, ours has performed sort of well in advance of any of the others. So we're very, very excited about the future with it. Other attributes of the technology, and this is important because it's not just an energy generator. Before I get onto that though, the benignness of the technology is important. There are no moving parts whatsoever in the water, and it uses no oils or hydraulic fluids or any other types of chemicals. The only thing in the water is a chunk of concrete, and it's static, it's not moving. So it's no different to sort of when they put rocks in the water for a breakwater or something along those lines. So there's no risk of harm to marine life, which is very important. But it also means that access for operations and maintenance is very, very simple. Anyone who needs to maintain the unit, do any work on it at all, it's a simple job up above the waterline on a nice, hopefully sunny day. Whereas many other wave energy technologies have all their moving parts, in many cases quite deep down below the water, on the seabed, maybe even in 30 meters of water. Even if you have just a single nut or bolt that needs to be changed, it becomes a really, really big job. So, you know, that's a major advantage of the technology. As I said, though, it has other applications, and the main one, besides the fact that any technology like this that produces renewable energy can be used to produce hydrogen and desalinated water and so on, but they can't all become a form of coastal protection. And that's what our technology can do. Now, what you see there, that's just a computer-generated image of the units incorporated into a breakwater. But basically, what the units do is they block the wave, at least to the width of the unit, and they turn the energy that normally would be, you know, maybe neutral, but in some cases a destructive erosion force on the coastline, particularly when the waves are big, and they take that energy, and instead of it being destructive, that it's turned into a constructive form of renewable energy. So when you place them side by side, either in like that image there, or you don't even need those rocks in between, you can place them completely side by side and make a breakwater entirely out of the units. You end up with a breakwater that's not a sunk cost. It is actually a revenue generating breakwater that produces renewable energy. So a very important point. There are certain parts of the world where this is a big problem. Take, for example, the Maldives, the lowest lying nation on Earth, lots of islands, every one of them at risk of being inundated through sea level rise due to climate change, but also even more immediate is the problem with erosion of those islands from the extreme storm events which is also a consequence of climate change. So there's an acknowledgement within that nation that eventually, it'll take decades to do this, but eventually they will probably need to surround every island with a seawall. And if you're going to do that, you may as well use something like this. Instead of just building a wall, build these units, place them side by side around the island. You then have the protection that you desire from erosion and inundation, but also a cheaper form of, a cheaper and a greener form of electricity, because currently all those island nations, they use almost entirely, they use diesel fuel to generate their electricity. And diesel fuel, not only is it obviously a dirtier way to generate electricity, it's a much, much more expensive way to generate electricity. Far more than what we pay on the mainland through the more established forms of electricity generation. So this becomes a much cheaper and a much cleaner way of generating electricity, and at the same time protecting the coastlines from erosion. Our King Island unit, there's a map of King Island, with a little inset showing where it is in Australia. It's in Bass Strait, a bit to the west of Tasmania, and just down below Cape Otway in Victoria. And that circle is where we're positioned. We chose to go on the west, the eastern, well, it's sort of the southeastern coast rather than the west coast. The west coast is a very, very high energy wave climate regime, and we decided to not take on the might of the Southern Ocean in the first instance, to some extent because it gave us greater weather windows for access, but also it meant that we were going to get conditions that range from zero wave height up to quite high, rather than quite high almost all the time. And we really wanted that big range of conditions to test the technology and see what it produced in all the different wave types, wave conditions. You can see what's called a wave rose over on the left, the coloured diagram, showing that almost predominantly the wave direction is from the southwest, and a little bit west-southwest as well. The diagram you can see here is what's on Hydro Tasmania's King Island Power Station dashboard. It's you can get this on an app. There's an app for exactly, and this is where this image came from, that tells you at any time, and you can do it right now if you have the app, how King Island's generation and distribution is distributed. Well, how much is coming from wind in this snapshot that was taken some time ago. At the time, there was over 1.6 megawatts of wind generation, 9 kilowatts of solar at the time. The battery, they have a battery that is powered up when there's too much renewable energy, and so they'll run some of that excess wind energy into the battery. So at this time, they were actually I think. It's coming. They're drawing from the battery. You can see the little orange arrow going into the main sort of central square there. Importantly, in this instance, the one over on the top right is the diesel generation, and they weren't drawing any diesel at the time. But there are times when there's no wind or very little wind, perhaps no solar at all, the battery's been exhausted and they have to fire up the diesel generator. When we start producing power into that grid, that small hybrid grid, we will enable the Hydro Tasmania to reduce their diesel consumption even further and fill in some of the gaps when they can't, well, when they need to draw on diesel. So the island itself, or this power station on King Island, when we're generating into their grid, will become the first in the world to draw on 3 different renewable power sources, wind, wave, and solar. So that'll be a first for not only ourselves, but for Hydro Tasmania as well, who have used this King Island grid as a bit of a test bed for the integration of renewables into island grids. if you can, one of the reasons we went there, or we chose King Island as our demonstration site, was because of Hydro Tasmania's expertise in that regard. And if you can demonstrate that a new renewable is suitable for a small island grid, well, then it's suitable everywhere, because into a major grid, it doesn't really feel any fluctuations. You know, it's too big. It doesn't. It's like you know, an elephant having a flea on it. But when that grid is really small and you're producing an amount that's, you know, of the same sort of order of magnitude, it is important that the quality of your power is high, and that's why I say it's, you know, if we can satisfy Hydro Tasmania, which we expect to, of course, then we can satisfy any grid in terms of taking the power from waves. The King Island unit itself, as I've said before, it's constructed primarily from concrete. You can see a photograph there during its construction. It's really quite simple in many regards. The turbine itself is built out of marine grade aluminium. It's had quite a bit of input from various experts, although, as I mentioned earlier, it's a very simple turbine. There's nothing complicated about it. It's not like previous turbines that I've certainly been involved with in the wave energy industry, which had to cope with that bi-directional flow, and therefore had blades that had to pitch back and forth on every stroke, every single stroke. So it has to know when to do that. And then it just makes the whole turbine more complicated and, in fact, less efficient too. I'll show you a few diagrams now. This one's, or photographs actually. This one, that's a buoyant pontoon. You can see there's one on either side of the unit. The big square or slightly rectangular blue at the front is a door in front of the opening of the chamber or the cabin. But those pontoons are buoyant, and that's how we got the unit to King Island, because it floated like a catamaran. And you can see it there sitting in the water. So despite all that concrete, those buoyant pontoons provided enough floating power for it to be towed down the Tamar River. You can see Launceston there in the background. That's before it was complete. We had to tow it to Bell Bay at the mouth of the Tamar for the top part to be then put onto the unit, and then it was towed to King Island. So there's a photograph of it in place at King Island. You can see it's a very nice area there. Not many waves on that day, and that was the day we installed it. And the reason we installed it that day was because there weren't many waves. You know, we needed a fairly flat day to do that. So you can see the unit in place. There's another of it in place, same day with no waves. This is another day when the waves started to pick up, and that's just at sunset, I think, or it might be sunrise. Actually, yeah, probably sunrise with the glow in the eastern skies there. So that's the technology and the King Island project. I'll just conclude. Well, have some concluding remarks here. You could provide some concluding remarks that hopefully relevant to yourselves. It was suggested that I provide some advice potentially that related to my experience, not just in this field, but in other endeavours like running around the world. So one of the lessons I think is for climate groups, and in fact I would probably give this advice to so many different organisations out there that are trying to achieve something, is about perseverance, and having a clear view of what it is you're trying to achieve, which of course is the big picture. And I think we all sort of are pretty up on what the big picture is, but you can't achieve the big picture in one go. You have to attack it one bite-sized piece at a time. And this is a philosophy I definitely had when running around the world. You can't look at the beginning of each day and see, particularly early on, and see that you've still got 20 something thousand kilometers in front of you, because you're not going to knock over too much of that in one day, yet it's still a long day. You've got to get out there, you're on the road for hours. So it was a matter of just looking at every day, one day at a time, and just understanding that I was achieving something. And that's the way I think any difficult long-term endeavor needs to be approached, is that don't worry if you're not getting to the end, getting to the end of the big picture in really quick time. As long as you are achieving something each day or each week or whenever you try to achieve things, when you can see this progress and these achievements occurring, you'll definitely stay more motivated, because you'll be able to measure in some way your progress. So it's a long journey. Inevitably, there are bad days and you have some setbacks, but don't get disheartened by those. Relevant to climate change activism in particular, clearly there are politicians that need to be approached. And my advice is, when doing so, always provide rational arguments for what you're proposing, not emotion. There's so much out there with different people trying to influence governments in different ways, and we've just seen in the US a very bad case of it, where irrational debate devoid of facts. There are people out there who just think that all you have to do is be emotional and show that you are really serious about something. If your argument is devoid of the facts, it's not really going to convince anyone. So, with climate change, the facts are on our side. But it just needs to be provided. The reasons for a particular proposal need to be provided in a good, rational way, and you can hardly fail but get your message across. As for a price on carbon, certainly that would definitely help our technology, but it will help all renewables and hasten the move from fossil fuels to renewables. I think it's going to happen without a price on carbon, but it would just be quicker with a price on carbon, because that then provides a level playing field. And a level playing field, I think, is important in any field of endeavor or game, whatever. As long as the field is even, well, then the winner will deserve to be the winner. But when the playing field is not level, you get distorted outcomes. You get winners who don't really deserve to be the winners. And so far, to some degree, that has been the case with fossil fuels. But it is changing.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our CCL channel by hitting the button in the top left-hand corner of this screen. Spread the word of CCL by using the share icon to as many of your contacts as possible. Thank you. See you next video.